Hello and welcome back. This is David from the Personal Finance Squad. We are in exercise 11, creating the budget, where we go into purchasing a vehicle. Now, for those of you that have a car or don't need a car right now, then this doesn't apply to you, but it may apply later because you may want to purchase a car in the future, or you might be coming off lease and want to release or buy a new car. So the way we put this down here is if this is something that you've never done, but also if you have, then this is something you can also use to your value. There's some key pieces in here that will certainly be a benefit to you. So what we've done here is throw out a base example here that you can work with. And again, you can, if you're a new person, this is probably a pretty good exercise. This is also laid out for what a student would do, but you can change this to any way you want. So what we're saying here in this exercise is that you have $2,500 in your savings set aside for a down payment for a vehicle, and you have to spend at least $5,000. So in some shape or form, you're going to have to do this, and these numbers are going to apply to you one way or the other. You're going to have some down payment typically, and you're going to have to spend at least a certain amount of money. So based on if it's a new car, so we have some considerations here that we put again in this base example. And what we say here is if you do not want to lease a vehicle, then a new car will require no less than $2,500 in financing. You need to make this the way that you want. You're going to need usually a down payment for a leased vehicle, but sometimes there are zero down leases. This is more of an exercise to think about how to manage this, because in most cases you're going to have to pay some money in order to buy a car. So you need to make sure that you account for some certain things. And right here we talk about fees, tax, title, and destination. So in a lease or a purchase, you're going to have to know what these costs are. Especially with the lease, you'll see all of this stuff on here. And sometimes they say, hey, we made waive a deposit, we may waive the destination fee or whatever. You have to look at what these terms are before you consider what you're going to purchase. Now, a good way, especially if you're going to buy the car, is to look at some online sellers. And a good one that people use a lot is TrueCar, Auto Trader's another place that lists vehicles as well. They'll give you numbers on what cars are really costing in your area, because they take averages that are inputted through your area, so you understand, again, as an overall consensus, what a car is typically going for. So you can certainly also look on a manufacturer's website, like a local dealership, or even a lease deal or an offer for financing for certain vehicles through any automaker. So I think it's always a good thing that you can look up anything you want online, but you're going to have to talk to a person online, and certainly on the phone, and then you're going to have to go in person to really do the work anyway to make the transaction happen. So, but to do some upfront work before you get there's never a bad thing, so you can save yourself some steps. Other things you want to think about is gas mileage, right? Because we've talked about a gas exercise and auto insurance, and these are all going to play into the car that you buy. So you need to know what kind of gas mileage it is, because that certainly can figure into your cost. Certainly we like to think that you should look at 3 options before you decide where you're going to buy. If you've narrowed it down to the car you want, that's fine. Otherwise, if you're trying to narrow it down to a certain amount of cars, you should definitely look at least 3 options out there to see what fits your needs. There are several cars out there to buy. Now we have some given variables here. Cars usually that are new are going to come with the standard warranty. So that's pretty obvious there, but always know what that is. And if you buy a used car, it might not have a warranty. A lot of cases they don't, or they may say we'll give you 5,000 miles, or 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, whatever they want. They'll cover X, right? Now, a good thing to start understanding even before you even go into a dealership to buy a car, or if you buy it from someone who's selling it by owner, you certainly want to know what it's going to cost you to finance it. Now, we're taking this from the standpoint, again, that you're going to finance it. If you have the money to pay for things with cash, you certainly can do that. In most cases, people do not have the money to do that. So we put some links in here to Bankrate, which is a common website. What they do here is they give you a general idea of what it's going to cost for an interest rate based on your location, like a zip code, and certainly it's based on what your credit score may be. They're just giving you a general number to work with. You should have an understanding of what your credit score is. So if it's poor, you're going to pay more. If it's really good, you might even pay a little less. But again, it gives you kind of an informational way of saying this is probably, again, the range of what I'm looking at. Okay, so once you know what your interest rate is, then you can go to the bank rate as well and hit this link here, you can go to anywhere you want really in terms of amortization, which will give you an understanding of what you're going to pay per the term that you have the car for. So if it's 3 years at 15 grand and you're paying 6% interest, those are the basic information pieces you're going to put into the calculator, and that should give you an idea to what it is in a ballpark of what you're going to pay for that car each month. Now we also have a sample grid that we're going to look at below, and we have it's auto comparison grid, and that grid will allow you to compare several things about the cars you're narrowing it down to see what works for you and why, ultimately make a decision what is in your best interest. So, we ask some questions in here and we say, well, what car did you choose? What leads you to that decision? So when we speak of tips here, again, you want to consider the amount of miles that you're going to drive if you lease a car. So oftentimes you'll see that when you lease a vehicle, there's a mileage restriction. So they'll say, hey, this lease is for 3 years or 36,000 miles, so 12,000 miles a year. A lot of times you'll see them at 10,000 miles, so it's really more, little over like 825 miles a month. So you need to look at that, because if you exceed that number, there's going to be a charge per excess per mile. So what that means is the excess is the rate of what you're going to pay for each mile that you drive over the prescribed miles. So if you pay 15 cents per mile over the miles driven, so let's say, for example, that you have 30,000 miles and you have 15 cents per mile over 30K. So let's just say you drove 15 miles over, and you would multiply that by 15, and it equals $2.25. So that's really cheap. But there's a lot of people who drive a lot of miles, and you need to factor that in based on your driving habits, and that's what gets back to the gasoline cost of trying to make an understanding with your trip calendar of really what you're putting on your car each year, because that can certainly factor in whether you want to lease a car or what the lease terms are in terms of miles. Some people even buy more miles on their lease and they put it into their payment because they know they're going to drive over. So again, these are things that you need to understand. Now, another thing you can do is, like, if you have a budget to put money in, and let's say in this case it was $2,500 as we've put down here, if the down payment rate is under $2,500, then you can keep that money in your pocket. So let's say it was $2,000, so that leaves you with $500 extra. You can either add it in, so you're really paying $2,500 down, but you're really adding an extra $500 into the payment. So that means your overall payment every month is going to lower, or you can take that $500 and put it back in the budget, which is really a savings, right? Back in the savings. And that's, some flexibility that you have. And we just talked about this briefly, but you have to determine how much gas you're going to need, right? And then you're going to have to pay for vehicle maintenance, and you're going to have to pay for auto insurance, and these all factor in the budget. So if we go down here, we have this auto grid that we spoke of, and you can see there's several things on here that provide nice value. And you can see right here that we compared a used versus a lease, for example. And because you're leasing, you don't have an interest rate. Over here it's 5.5. And then we talked about the down payment, $2,500. In this case with the Focus, we said it's $1,500, so you really have $1,000 in this scenario. So again, you could take that $1,000 and put it into the car, or you could certainly put it back in your savings. And then certainly miles per gallon is very important. So you can see, for example, the Focus is much better than the Mini Cooper. And so again, does that factor in what you need, or does it not? Certainly taxes, state tax is important if you have a domicile in a state that charges tax. If you don't, that's a nice bonus for you. There's title fees, there's destination fees. Certainly warranties help. Usually warranties are pretty much covered for the duration that you're driving the car based on the miles, right? So they say your lease is for 3 years or 30,000 miles, or it's 1 year or 10,000 miles, maybe for the used car as an example. So there's a lot of things on here, right? Miles. You're buying a car, in this case, it says there's 120,000 miles on that car, so there's a lot of wear and tear. So you're more susceptible to having repairs in the future, whereas with a new car, with the Focus, with the Lease, the ability to have less mechanical failures is much better. So that's a reason a lot of people lease. They want something fresh, they want something new, and they know the car is probably going to be more reliable than the one that has all the miles on it. So it's very attractive to people, and that's why leasing is something that occurs quite a bit. Now, certainly cost. Now, in this case, $2,500 down, less the $8,000 purchase price, left $5,500 to finance. And in this case over here, you're not financing a lease, you're just putting the money down. And then there's a term, of course, that's 3 years. In this case, we said 36 months, which is the same thing, but you'll put 36 months into your amortization calendar, in this case right here, and that would, produce your payment. So we did some quick calculation here, and we said, $5,500 at we just put in a hypothetical interest rate of 5.5% here, and that creates a payment of $166 a month. And in this case, you have $225 in the lease payment, which is a fixed price as well. And then right here, we talked about mileage over a certain amount. So this is really 20 cents per mile charge over 30,000 miles, and oil changes are included, for example. So that's something you don't need to account for in that particular thing. So in this case over here, you don't have anything. You have no oil changes. And then what you're going to see as we get into the next section, we're going to talk about vehicle maintenance. You have to understand that you're going to have to pay for things down the road that usually come up with, like tires perhaps, or brakes, or wipers, or air filters, things that are general maintenance on the car that need to be taken care of. You can see vehicle maintenance is certainly a piece that you need to add in with the lease or purchase of a vehicle, along with auto insurance and gasoline. So auto ownership or leasing is a very big piece of the budget as well. So there's a lot of factors that tie in. Certainly looking at all these pieces in here for the car that you want really can play a really good factor in making a good decision for you. Okay, so that's going to end this section, and when we get into really this, we're going to call this creating the budget into vehicle maintenance right here. It's the next piece we're referring to, and we will go through a little exercise there that will again add another piece of the budget, but a very important one because it's a cost that will incur at some point to you. Okay, so thanks for joining, and we will see you in the next video.